Hello friends, welcome to another series of the Kubernetes, and this is more interesting topic on the Kubernetes. As you know, if you want to expose your application to the external users, this is a really important one in Kubernetes. So as you can say, this is the head of your application where you have developed your application in different flavors, but you have a feature to be enabled and expose your application to the external user. So here comes the topic services in Kubernetes. And this is my extension of that previous videos like the Kubernetes breaking cluster. And after the next to that volumes, I'm going to record these services. And this is mainly about covering the different types of services. So before jumping into the video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel to get this type of content future. So let's jump into it. So services. So mainly, when you have an application and you know how to deploy the application, once your deployment is completed in your cluster, how an end user or either yourself can able to see your response of your deployment. So that's the first question. Then when this question comes into your mind, the answer will be services. So the service will be running into your cluster, which can be attached to your deployment and it can be exposed to your external user. Okay. When it comes to the external users, there are different types of levels in services. I just going to the services one by one, and I'll explain you the different points into the services. So let's check out the first one, cluster IP. So this is the mainly cluster IP can be used for the backend services. Okay. So for example, if you have an application, say like a database application. So database is running always behind the screen, and this should be running behind the screen with the security things and also the database, whatever is coming from the user from the front end application, that needs to be stored into your backend data. So that's the use of database. So we can attach cluster IP service to this backend application, then your data will be stored into that one and you don't need to expose this service to the external user because it is an internal DB service. So if you see in the right hand side, I have given the complete manifest about the sample cluster IP service. If you see here, the protocol is TCP and the port is default 80 and target port is 80. That can be changed for the different flavors of your database applications. For example, MySQL having a one port number. If you use Cassandra, that will have a different port number. So like that, you can change the target ports. And this type will be your indication of which service it is. So if you give the cluster IP, that is a default type of your service, the cluster IP. Even when you have an experience of bringing up an cluster, a default service will comes into the place with the Kubernetes. That will be cluster IP because it doesn't have any feature. It will be running inside your cluster using a cluster IP. Make sense? Next, going to the another service, NodePort. So NodePort is like as I said, like you have an application, you want to expose that application using a service. For that criteria, NodePort service will help you in a very good way. For example, you have a development team, you want to expose this backend API service, whatever the data stored into the backend services, and that data has to be retrieved and it will be shown on the front end page. So how it can be happen? So using this NodePort service only, you can attach the NodePort IP to your front end service and you can make the backend service will be running behind the screen. So when user connected to the front end service and he can enter some data, the data will be shown in the DB. Once after 2 days or 3 days, if the user try to get the data, how the data is coming from the DB, how the retrieving process is happening. So there could be some connection between this front-end service and the back-end service. So that's where this NodePort service and cluster IP services internally making a call to the each other and providing the response to the user. So here also, I given the NodePort services like this and how this NodePort service and cluster IP, like the backend service, are getting connected using this labels and selectors. So whatever the labels you are providing for this, like app backend and app backend here, right? So this could be same for the backend services also, so that both will be clustered each other. And here, when you give node port, it will use a default port number from 0 to 32767. Okay, so that is the port ranges for a node port. That can be randomized, or you can select your external port number, whatever you wish, but will be there is a limit we need to use till 32767. Okay, and target port number. So the main things and all are same. The type you need to notice that is a node port. If you put NodePort, that's a front-end exposed service. Next one is load balancer service. As you have your on-prem service, yes, you can maintain with the ClusterIP or NodePort services. But when you are using the advanced Kubernetes cluster going into cloud, you can have your own load balancers. In AWS, you have application load balancers, ALB, and even in Google Cloud also, you have your own Google load balancers. So you have in times you have to use that load balancers to your service, right? So for that purpose, you can use this load balancer service. You can get the load balancer from your cluster and provide that load balancer name here, and you can make the type as a load balancer. Then automatically the request comes to that load balancer will be exposed to the down the line services and provide the response back to the user. That is the main usage of this load balancer. There are other services in Kubernetes that will be like XLM services. This is like you have your database application separately and you want to make a connection to that one. Yes, you can make use of services, connect to that also. And this is a very rare cases we can use it. And sometimes we have a scenario, a service has to connect to the multiple ports, right? For that purpose also, we have a multi-port services in Kubernetes that you can make use of it accordingly to your requirement. So as a whole, any application you want to expose to the external user, you need to have a service, and that service will be pointed to a deployment. So whatever the deployment is providing the response, that will be called to the service and that can be sent to the front end page. So that is the connectivity of it. Now I'm going to show you a small demo to make you understand how it is working. So if you see, this is a ClusterIP NodePort. These are the YAMLs I have created. But if you create, so these are the sample services work. If you notice here, the node port type having a port number default generated. Okay, I haven't given anything. I just given that local port number as an 80, but the external port number it is default taking it as a 3007. Okay, default port number. And at the same time for the load balancer also, if you notice here, it's an external IP which is in pending state. Why? Because my host is running on-prem. It's my own cluster in my mission, but I didn't connect it to any AWS cloud or anything. So it is still trying to pending, but it is not in a working. When you have a load balancer, you have to declare that load balancers in your service, and it can be exposed to the again same port number. And the cluster IPs, as I said, like default Kubernetes cluster IP, it's running inside your base cluster. Multi-port services, I have created two port numbers, so it started using the two port services. Now these are the basic core services I have developed, but I didn't attach it to any application for information. So I have, if you follow my previous videos, like I have developed an Nginx application. That's a very basic application. A deployment will be matched to a service. So if a deployment will have a service only, then only your application can be exposed. So that is the main core thing. You have to know that when how that application will be exposed to the external user. So this is about the services in the Kubernetes. And there's a one more topic in the services in Kubernetes that is called ingress. That is a very core important topic in Kubernetes. I'm going to cover that completely in my next series. So if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Support.